Hello everyone and welcome back to part 4 of my How to Build a PC series for 2023. And this video admittedly has been delayed pretty significantly. So today I'm going to be walking you through the basics for setting up a brand new PC that you've just assembled, installing Windows 11, getting the system set up, basically taking you from a PC that you've just built to a PC that you can actually use.
Excellent!
Today's video is brought to you by the Corsair IQ-Link System Hub, a single small controller that manages all of your system cooling and RGB lighting. The IQ-Link System Hub mounts magnetically to your case and can control up to 14 devices, 7 per port, with daisy chain support so you can simplify your cable management while still enabling glorious synchronized RGB. Corsair's IQ software can automatically configure IQ-Link components while enabling precise fan speed control and real-time system monitoring. Click the sponsor link in the video's description for more on the Corsair IQ-Link System Hub. Before I get into the tutorial, I wanted to say a big thank you to those of you who did watch my part 1, part 2, and part 3 videos. Part 1 was an introduction in PC basics, part 2 was a budget-oriented build, and that's going to be the one that I'm setting up today. Part 3 was a high-end build with lots more bells and whistles, and part 4, of course, is setup. And I'm not going to go into all the details as to why this video was so long delayed, but in order to actually produce it in a timely fashion, I'm sticking to the basics today, just doing the setup on the budget PC, but I will include links to the other videos as well as a bunch of helpful stuff down in this video's description. All that said, let's kick off the tutorial with some preparation and going over the parts that you will need. The things you need to get your system set up. You will need the system, of course, the actual computer that you built, along with some of the accessories that came with it, such as a power cord. You will also need peripherals, a mouse and a keyboard, and you'll need a monitor to connect the computer to. I actually have 2 monitors over here, one that's right there and one that's right here. Part of the reason I have the one right here is because the next thing you'll need for this setup is another computer, at least temporarily, in order to get your Windows installer USB set up. If you already have a Windows 11 USB installer, you can get by without the additional computer, but I'm going to be assuming that you have one at least temporarily, because that'll be some of the first steps I go over. Along with that additional computer, you will need a USB drive to make into your Windows 11 installer, so it will be wiped and blanked, so make sure you have nothing important on it. I recommend one that's at least 8 gigabytes in capacity, but you can use a larger one if that's all you have. You should also have a reasonable understanding of the hardware that's in the system that you presumably just built, which you probably already have, but keep in mind at least the brand and model of the motherboard that you use, because that will be important. And keeping your motherboard accessories on hand and even the manual can be helpful as well, because the last thing you need for this setup is internet, either a wired connection to your home router, represented by this Ethernet cable, or your PC might have built-in Wi-Fi depending on the type of motherboard that you installed. The motherboard we're using in this system does not have built-in Wi-Fi, but if yours came with that, it probably came with a Wi-Fi antenna, and you'll probably want to grab that and connect it to the antenna leads on the back of your motherboard's I/O. If the system you built doesn't have Wi-Fi and you don't have close access to your router to plug in an actual cable, fortunately, there are $10 to $20-ish USB Wi-Fi adapters available that you just plug into one of the USB ports on the back of your motherboard. So that's an easy way to add wireless internet if your motherboard doesn't come with it. Now, if you're excited about getting your new PC set up, you can go ahead and start plugging things in now, such as your AC power cable, which goes into your power supply. You also need to switch the power supply on. Mouse and keyboard are typically just going to plug in with standard USB connectors, so we'll plug those in. I only have a Type-C for my keyboard, and there's none on the motherboard I/O, but fortunately, there's one I can use temporarily up here on the front panel I/O. To plug in your monitor, you'll probably have an HDMI cable like this one, or possibly DisplayPort. Plug that into your graphics card here. Note that your motherboard I/O might have some video out connectors if your CPU has integrated graphics. But if you have installed a discrete graphics card, you want to plug your monitor into that and not to the motherboard. Lastly, for wired internet, we have an Ethernet cable here that will plug in right there. But I'm actually going to leave that unplugged for now. Now that everything's plugged in, I'm going to set that PC aside and take out my USB drive, because I'm going to use the other computer to make this into a Windows 11 USB installer. So over here on this system, I can see the USB drive that I've just plugged in. It is empty and blank right now. So next I'm going to pull up my browser and I'm going to go over to the Microsoft.com website, the download Windows 11 page, which I will link in this video's description. And there's info on this page that you can read, but what I'm going to do is create Windows 11 installation media, the second option right here. Go ahead and click download now. And over here it is downloading the media creation tool. This is a pretty small utility, so once it's downloaded, I'm going to double click to run it. I get a user account control prompt. I'm going to click yes for that. And then it will take me to this page, getting a few things ready, some licenses that we must read completely and thoroughly and agree to. We're going with English and the Windows 11 edition. Recommended options for this PC is usually going to be okay for you to choose. And we're doing a USB flash drive, not creating an ISO file. And because I only have one USB drive that's connected, that's viable to set up as a USB installer, that's what it's chosen. But do bear in mind, if you have multiple drives connected, you want to make sure that you choose the right one here. And at this point, we have a little bit of a wait. It needs to download Windows 11 to plop it onto the USB drive. That might go faster or slower depending on your internet connection speed, but take a short coffee break here and we'll come back once the progress has gotten up to 100%. And thankfully, it finished. This took a little bit longer than I was expecting, so again, bear in mind internet connection speed and the speed of the USB drive might affect that, but let's click finish. All right, I'm going to rename this to Win11 USB, just so I know what it is. And this is still a USB drive, so we can still add some stuff to this that might be helpful as we go through a setup on the new computer. The things I'm going to download now are the latest UEFI or BIOS for our motherboard to update that to the latest version. And I'm also going to get the network driver for whatever network device I have on the motherboard, whether that's wired internet or Wi-Fi. Sometimes Windows 11 will recognize that off the bat, but sometimes it won't. And if it doesn't, you can't connect to the internet, so having that up front can be helpful. So if you find your motherboard's product page, and for this it's the Gigabyte B550 Gaming XV2, and note that sometimes there's different revisions, so make sure you've chosen the proper revision. If you're curious, it's usually on the label on your motherboard box. I have revision 1.1. We're going to click on Support, and then we're going to go to Downloads. Note that we're installing Windows 11, so go ahead and choose that. We don't need to worry about other drivers like the audio or the chipset just yet. Of course, you could download those now if you wanted to. I want the LAN driver, so I'm going to download that. And then for the BIOS here, there's probably quite a few different revisions, so you can go ahead and take a look at those. Chances are you just want to get the latest BIOS that's available, but you might want to go back a version or two if the latest one is a beta, for example. So on my Windows 11 USB, I'm just going to make a new folder for the motherboard. I like to label the folder the name of the motherboard. It helps me keep things sorted. We'll do one here for BIOS and a folder for the LAN. The two downloads are zipped or compressed folders, so we will want to decompress them. For the BIOS in particular, there's 4 files. The only one we actually need is this file here, which is the actual BIOS. And then for the LAN, we have this executable file here, so I'll drop that into that folder. Wait for that to copy over, verify that it's there, and we should be good to go. So now I'm going to take my newly created Windows 11 USB installer and plug it into one of the open USB ports on the back of the new system. And now we can turn the system on for the first time. Or maybe the second or third time if you already did a few practice startups. Now, when the system first powers on, it will try to find a drive that's connected that might have an operating system to load up. It might reach out to your USB drive if it doesn't find that and automatically boot off the USB drive. That's a cool thing if it does that. Alternatively, you'll want to tap the delete button as the system boots up, and you get a splash screen on the screen like this. Usually it will be the brand name of your motherboard. If you tap the delete button while the system is initially booting up, it will take you into the UEFI or BIOS environment. BIOS stands for Basic Input-Output System, and that's where you can control and adjust some of the low-level features of the motherboard, and that's also where you can do some useful things like updating the UEFI or BIOS. So you can see there at the bottom it says delete to enter BIOS setup or QFlash. So that's why I was tapping delete. That'll take us to this screen here. This is the easy mode UEFI BIOS. This will show us some basic information about the parts we have installed, like what our motherboard is, the current BIOS version, what CPU we have installed, the Ryzen 5 5600, our RAM that's installed, and we can even see the 2 DIMMs in the 2 DIMM slots with 8 gigs per stick. We can see connected drives, we can see our fans are spinning and their RPMs over here. And very importantly, if we click on M.2, we can see our Kingston NV2 1TB SSD there. And that's where we're going to install Windows. But before any of that, let's update the UEFI. We can access that down here with QFlash. There's a shortcut by hitting F8, or you can just click it. We want to update the BIOS. It's automatically pulled up our USB drive that's plugged in right here. So I'm going to click that folder that I made, go to the BIOS folder, and then there's the BIOS file that I copied. We'll hit Next. Are you sure to update? Yes. And here it will verify the file, and then it will go ahead and run through the update. Here's where you should be very careful not to disconnect, unplug, or otherwise shut off your computer while it's going through this process. I do need to click one more to start. Most motherboards now have a USB BIOS flashback function that will allow you to recover in case you have a bad BIOS update or a failure or power outage in the middle of it, but it's something you want to avoid if you can. And once again, we'll wait a few moments until this finishes. After the update completes, the system will automatically reboot, and here is where you want to go into the Windows 11 installation environment. As mentioned before, if you don't have any drives connected that have operating systems loaded onto them, it will often just reach out to that USB drive if it's the only bootable device and automatically boot from there. So the restart might just take you into the Windows 11 installation environment. But if that doesn't happen for you, you're going to want to hit delete again to get back into the UEFI menu as we have just now. And you'll want to find a menu for boot devices or boot sequence. Again, since we're in easy mode here, it's trying to put the most useful stuff right here at the front for you. So we have a boot sequence here that we can choose, and we can quickly and easily just drag and drop these to rearrange them. The UEFI generic flash disk is what we're booting off of. So that being first is where it should be, and if we restart, it will boot off of that drive. Switching over to advanced mode, we also have a boot menu, and here you could also change the boot priorities. Sometimes there'll be a boot override option here, and you can just choose the device you want to boot from. That's another way. But if we save and exit, I'm going to try to show you the last thing, which is a quick boot menu that you can access as the system is booting up. Instead of pressing delete, we're going to press, I think it's F11 or F12. So it says on that splash screen that shows up at the bottom, it happened so quickly I wasn't able to see, but I was tapping F11 and F12 and it got me to this menu. So here you can just directly choose your boot device. Again, we're just going with the UEFI generic flash disk. That is our Windows installer, so selecting that will boot off of the USB drive. This is the first screen you'll see after booting off of the USB drive. Change these if you need to. We're using English and we're in the US, so we'll stick with that. Note that your USB installer has a repair function, so don't format it or get rid of it after you have Windows 11 installed. Keep it around so you can choose repair your computer if you ever come across problems in the future. I'm just going to click install now. If you have a Windows 11 product key or even an older product key for Windows 10 or Windows 8, you can punch it in here. You can also do that after Windows is installed though, so we're just going to choose I don't have a product key for now. And then here you want to choose your Windows 11 version, which is likely either going to be Windows 11 Home or Windows 11 Pro. I'm going with Windows 11 Pro. But make sure you choose the version of the key type that you have if you already have a key. There's another license here that we will very thoroughly read and accept. And as for installation type, we want to go with custom because a clean install is always going to be the best way to go. This screen is where you choose where you want to install Windows. Note that the drive name, like drive 0, means these are both partitions on the same drive. We actually have two drives connected right now. One of them already has some games on it, and I can tell by the amount of gigabytes here that that is the 2 terabyte drive, and it has another partition. But we're not installing there, we're just installing on drive 1. Here again, the drive you install to will be completely erased and overwritten. So if you haven't already backed up data off of the drive you're installing Windows 11 onto, stop right now, reboot, connect the drive elsewhere, and copy stuff off of that before you format it. You can also run into a question at this point where if you have multiple drives installed, and let's say they're all brand new drives, but maybe you have multiple M.2 drives that are installed up against the motherboard, and you wanted to do that before you installed the graphics card, because it would be a pain in the butt to remove the graphics card to install more M.2 drives. Here again, your manual can help out if you go to the storage section where it talks about SATA connected devices or M.2 connected devices. And here it will usually list, based on the actual physical connector on the board that the drive is connected to, the order that they go in, and that should help you determine which drive you actually want to install to. If you are installing to a drive that already has partitions, you should select each partition and hit the delete button to delete that partition so that you're just installing to unallocated space on this new drive. You can create partitions yourself, but I find it's easiest just to click next at that point, and the installer will automatically set up your partitions for you, using up the maximum amount of space on the drive. And here we once again have a short wait as it installs the Windows files onto that drive. This part's usually a little bit faster, especially if you're using a fast SSD, so probably in the 5 to 10 minute range. After the installation completes, it will automatically restart and boot you into Windows for the first time. Note here that if you changed your boot order to boot off of that USB drive, it might boot back into the Windows installation utility, and you don't want to install Windows again, you just did that. So just keep in mind if you change that UEFI setting, you might want to go back into the UEFI to change it back, but typically it will just reboot and then boot off of the drive that it just installed Windows to, as it is doing now. And now we're in the Windows 11 initial setup environment. So here's where we're going to choose stuff like, what is your country or region? What kind of keyboard layout you have? Do you want to add a second keyboard? There's some accessibility options in here if you need it. And it's kind of funny because this is my first time working with this most latest Windows 11 installer. And this is the point where it wants you to connect to a network so it can tie you into the Microsoft account. So I'm not sure what it does here. If it doesn't recognize any network connectivity devices, maybe it lets you bypass this. But right now it's saying, hey, you've got Ethernet, plug in your internet so we can connect. Now, some people who have a Microsoft account have their Windows installation tied to their Microsoft account, and that's totally fine if you want to do it that way. That does allow Microsoft to track you a little bit more closely though, and if you're like me, I like to go the old school method and install Windows to this PC rather than having Windows tied to me personally. Fortunately, there is a workaround for this. It's just a little bit of a pain in the butt, so bear with me. I'm going to press Shift and F10. That will open up a command prompt. I'm going to type this, and I'll put this in the video description down below as well. OOBE /bypassnro. And then I'll hit enter. That will reboot the system, and theoretically when it reboots, it will let me bypass that requirement to have an internet connection. Back to our setup steps. US, skip. And now magically we have a button that we can click that says, I don't have internet. And then we can continue with limited setup. And now we can just punch in our name. You can make it your name, you can make it a name for your computer, whatever you want to call it. I'm going with B550XV2, which sounds cool. I would also recommend you add a password. I'm going to skip it now for ease of use, but a password is definitely something you should have on your system. And now we're going to select privacy settings. And this is, again, one of those things that's giving Microsoft more permission to track you. And if you're the kind of person who thinks like, oh, I love seeing advertisements, having them more tailored to me would be a good thing, then yes, you can leave these on. Personally, I like to deselect pretty much every single one of these. None of them are required to use Windows or even to use Windows properly. I think the most useful one that you'd want to keep on maybe is Find My Device, but that's a lot more useful for something that's portable like a laptop. So I'm going to turn them all off, except, oh hi. Then Windows says hi to you and does a few more messages, and in just a few moments, we should be in the Windows 11 actual operating system environment where we can do stuff. Almost there. And there we are, it's Windows 11. And Windows 11, thanks to the tie-in with the UEFI, has certain stuff that might pop up automatically, like download the Gigabyte App Center. Personally, the software that ships with a lot of motherboards, or that they want you to use with a lot of motherboards, I find to be a little bit bloated and unnecessary. So I usually select Do Not Show This Message again and cancel. But if you open up Explorer and go to this PC, you should be able to see your drive that you just installed Windows to, which is mostly empty. It's only got the Windows data on there for right now. An additional drive, if it's already set up, might show up there as well. This is my 2 terabyte SATA drive, which has a bunch of games on it. And then this drive here, which is our USB installer that we made. And if we open that up, we can see the folder that we made before. And if the internet wasn't working, then we would probably want to run this file right here to install the LAN driver. Alternatively, if the Windows 11 installer was able to recognize your network connection hardware, then you can just plug in your Ethernet cable now. And hooray, we now have an internet connection. Fantastic. Now there are a few things that you can do at this point, but personally the first things I like to do with a freshly installed copy of Windows is to get Windows Update going and do all the Windows updates as quickly as you can, and to install the basic motherboard drivers, specifically the chipset driver I think is the most important. So I'm going to hit the Windows key and I'm going to type Update. Windows Updates is in the settings. You can also go right here to check for updates, and we'll automatically check for updates. And it's probably going to come up with a pretty long list. Fun thing about Windows Update, it will automatically update your graphics driver. So my screen just turned off there for a second and then turned back on. And if you're looking at the screen cap, you might notice things are looking a little bit sharper now. That is because it automatically updated my display resolution to 4K because the capture card I'm running through is 4K capable, which is why it did that. Let's change this. The point I'm trying to make though is that as it's running Windows Update, it might be installing stuff in the background such as basic drivers, so a screen flashing off and then back on is pretty normal. So your Windows Update experience might vary. It's going to be downloading some things, it's going to be installing some things. Because I have an Asus device connected, it's asking me if I want to download Armory Crate. That's another Motherboard provided software utility that I don't want, so I'm going to cancel that. And at various points, you'll see this button here turn to Restart Now. So if you see this prompting you to restart, you can go ahead and click Restart. It'll probably do some additional installation things as it's restarting. And again, depending on when you're installing Windows, when you're watching this video, you might have fewer or more updates to run through. But the basic idea is run Windows Update, restart when it asks you, run Windows Update again, repeat that over and over again until when you click Find More Updates, it says you're up to date. So now that we've rebooted, I am checking for updates again. Just like I said, there are more updates, so it's going to download and install those as well. Some will download and install automatically. You might have to tell it to download and install some of those. That one was really quick at least. We're going to have to use Microsoft Edge at least briefly, and I always turn off all the things that like try to access your data and have you log in and do all those things. It's like, no, Microsoft, I don't want to just let me search for something on Google, please. Okay. So when you're running Windows Update, it will be downloading and installing a more up-to-date chipset driver for your motherboard. It will also probably download and install a more up-to-date graphics driver for your video card. But usually what Windows Update has available might not be the latest and greatest. So I'm going to go back to Gigabyte's motherboard page. And I'm also going to go to the NVIDIA driver download page. Since we're running an NVIDIA graphics card here, I would go to the AMD Radeon driver download page if I was downloading a graphics driver for an AMD Radeon GPU. For the motherboard, I'm going to go back to the support tab again, and I'm going to go down here to drivers. And again, you don't need all of these. Like, your sound will work without the full-on Realtek HD audio driver, but it might give you some more features if you download this. Since we're going for the basics here, I will definitely want the latest chipset driver, which is from April 2022. So chances are the Windows Update one is totally fine for that. Since the latest chipset for the B550 chipset on the motherboard we're using is that old, that is likely what Windows installed, but we can download it anyway. Over on NVIDIA, I'm going to choose the RTX 30 series. We have a 3060 Ti installed here. Go for Windows 11, search, download, and download. Cancel. Okay. Now, generally speaking, you shouldn't overlap driver installation. So if Windows Update is running in the background, try not to install like your graphics drivers or your chipset drivers at that exact same time. This is prompting me for another restart, so I'm going to go ahead and do that. All right, we've rebooted once again, so I'm going to open up Explorer, go over to my downloads. Let's go ahead and get that motherboard driver installed. Remember, it comes in a zipped package, so you got to pull it out of the zip in order to actually run this. I'm going to do some UI tweaks here in just a second so we can actually see file name extensions and stuff like that. Okay, that one seems to have finished. I'm now noting also that we have an NVIDIA icon down here in our system tray, so I'm going to double click that to see what version of the NVIDIA drivers got installed, 457.51, versus the one I just downloaded, which is 536.67. So the Windows available one that will download through Windows Update, quite a bit older than the most recent NVIDIA drivers. So I'm going to load that up too. Go ahead and click yes, click OK. Again, in my quest to reduce software bloat, I usually just go with the graphics driver and not the graphics driver and the GeForce Experience. If you use the GeForce Experience, if you use it for game capture or anything like that, by all means install that too. For now, I'm going to keep things simple. I usually choose custom here. That way I can make sure the proper things are selected, and since this is a completely fresh Windows install, a clean installation shouldn't be necessary. And once again, we have a little bit of a wait. This should be the last of the major driver level software updates that we need to do for the system. I would keep running Windows Update to make sure that's okay, but while this installs in the background, I'm gonna do a couple more quick UI tweaks. So for instance, your toolbar is in the center by default in Windows 11. Do you like it that way? I don't. If you right-click on the taskbar and go to Taskbar Settings, it will take you to this menu. If you scroll down a little bit to Taskbar Behaviors, you can set the taskbar alignment to left. Oh look, and now it's over there on the left, like it used to be. There might also be stuff on the taskbar down here that you never use or don't want to use, like chat or widgets. You can turn those off too if you don't like them. Graphics driver finished installing. I'm gonna hold off on the restart just for a moment to show you my other vital Windows 11 tweaks. If you pull up Explorer and go over here to Options, you will find the Folder Options menu. I like to open to this PC, and under View, I like to display the full path, show hidden files, and don't hide empty drives. And this is the one that's most important. Hide extensions for known file types. I always turn that off because I like to know what my files are. Like, this is an executable. I like seeing that it's .exe on the end. Those are just a couple quick ones that I like to do. While I'm at it, let's get Firefox. You can get Chrome as well. I like Firefox because you can actually use some of the add-ons that Chrome-based browsers like Chrome and Edge have done away with, or at least greatly reduced the functionality of, like uBlock Origin. But whatever browser you prefer, you can go ahead and install that now. Or, just keep using Edge. It's not the worst thing in the world these days. Ta-da! Now Firefox is installed, and I've set it to my default browser. You can unpin stuff that you don't want from the taskbar, like the Microsoft Store. Oh, look how simple and clean that is now. Okay, I'm certain there's other UI stuff that you guys might do, so if you guys have any suggestions for other people watching this video, or some really great ones, leave those in the comment section down below. Last thing I'm gonna do here is right-click on the clock down here and go to Adjust Date and Time. This is actually set to China time right now, because a lot of these motherboards are manufactured in China or Taiwan. Set time automatically, I'm just gonna turn off and then back on, and then it should set me to my local time here, which is 3 in the afternoon. One other thing here, I'm typing in Start to go to Startup Apps right here. And here also you can turn off some of the startup apps that you don't necessarily need, like Microsoft Teams if you don't use that, or OneDrive, or Edge. Good. At this point, you could start downloading and installing more software to your system to get it set up for gaming and stuff like that. I highly recommend HWInfo or HWInfo. The portable version of that is a great way to load up to monitor temperatures and system performance. OBS is fantastic, open broadcaster software. You can download that for streaming and game capture. Steam, of course, or any other game clients, you should install and start those games downloading if you're not going to copy them from an existing drive. But there is one more really important thing for system setup that's a little bit more low-level and fundamental that we haven't done yet, and that's enable the XMP settings for our memory. Sometimes you can do that right off the bat, but not all XMP settings are actually going to be stable. So to be safe, I usually like to get the system setup going, make sure everything's running without any issues before that. That way we know if we suddenly turn on XMP settings and we're getting hangs or that sort of thing in the operating system, it was probably the XMP settings that did it. So here's a trick to get back into the UEFI. Open up your Windows menu, go to the power button here. You're gonna go to restart, but I'm gonna hold down the shift button before I click restart. And that will take me to this menu, which lets you do multiple things, but restarting contextually, I think is kind of how it's called. If we go over to Troubleshoot and Advanced Options, we want to go to UEFI Firmware Settings. Also note that from here you can choose Startup Settings, and that will let you reboot into safe mode, which is really, really helpful for troubleshooting if you need to do that down the line. But I'm going to click UEFI Firmware Settings. That will boot straight into the UEFI BIOS environment that before we had to tap delete to get into. Some PCs start so fast that it's actually hard to get your delete tap in time there. So this is a great way to do it from Windows and make sure you get into the UEFI every time. So all we're going to do here is turn on our XMP. I'm switching back to easy mode because they have a button for it right here. All we do is click that button. Now XMP is enabled for our DDR4 3600 speed memory. Alternatively, in advanced mode, it's right here, the XMP profile, and you can choose that and go between disabled or profile 1. It's already loaded, so I'm just going to hit F10 to save and exit, and then we'll reboot back into Windows. Now, if you're the kind of person who likes to look at your system tray down here and likes to have it as clean as possible, you might notice this little Windows security icon pops up. This is for account protection. They need you to sign in with your Microsoft account to do that, so don't be fooled into thinking, oh no, I have to sign in with my Microsoft account. You can just dismiss that right there, and then that gets all these checkboxes to green, and that should make that little icon thing turn green too. So now, as I go back to Windows Update to check for updates yet again, and there are more updates yet again, and that's why it usually takes maybe 3 or 4 passes of running Windows Update and restarting before you get all of them in there. But at this point, I would say this computer is pretty much set up in terms of the basic functionality of the hardware, getting Windows 11 installed with some basic tweaks to get it working the way we need it to, and also getting you prepared to actually make use of your new computer, play some games, and do all the fun stuff that you can do with a brand new PC. So I hope you guys have enjoyed this video. I hope you've enjoyed this series. Again, my apologies for part 4 being so delayed, but I really hope this has helped you guys out. And if you have any questions for me or feedback, leave those in the comment section down below. Also, in the video's description, I'll post links to those other 3 videos in this series if you happen to have missed them or need to jump back to check on something. But as for me, I have a bunch of work still to be done. I need to move out of this office and a few other things, but I will still be running tech news every Sunday, as well as a few other scattered videos. And as we get towards the end of summer, I'll be ramping production back up and hopefully getting back to my regular upload schedule of about 3 videos a week. But once again, if you guys enjoyed this video or if it helped you out, hit the thumbs up button. That really helps me. If you know anyone who might make use of this video or who is setting up a new computer, make sure to share it with them. And of course, if you want to check out my store and help support my channel, you can find that at paulshardware.net, linked in the video's description. I have shirts, mugs, pint glasses, hoodies, and all manner of high quality merchandise. Thanks once again for watching, and we'll see you all in the next video.